I want to share with you some of the information or the data that came about from my research. Basically, in my research, I interviewed 30 couples. 12 of them I started with, and we did a focus group, 4 focus groups, 3 couples in each focus group, to kind of understand what is on their mind and what they would like me to ask the other groups. So out of these 4 focus groups, I developed a questionnaire, which I then took to 18 one-on-one couples interviews. To give you an idea about the characteristics of the respondents, their age basically varied. The median age was about 38 years old. The youngest was 27 years old, and the oldest was 69 years old. The youngest female participant was 28 years old, and the oldest was 58 years old at the time of my interviews. The ethnic backgrounds of the people whom I interviewed, all participants were Canadian citizens and could ultimately be identified as Canadian. But however, they were able to trace their ethnic identity back to their country of origin from which they immigrated to Canada as children or adults. And in cases where they were Canadian born, they traced their identity back to the country of the origin of their parents or grandparents. Some of these ethnic identities of the people I interviewed included Polish, Jamaican, German, Greek, Romanian, Dutch, British, Japanese, Indian, Italian, American of Swedish descent, and Canadian of European descent. It's also significant to mention that in addition to the ethnicities mentioned above, the 12 couples who participated in the focus group sessions represented other ethnicities such as Chinese, Haitian, Irish, Scottish, and Serbian. So we can start here to observe that Copts are intermarrying partners of all nations. This move represents a new paradigm in Coptic history, where ethnic background is no longer a determining factor in choosing one's spouse. It appears that many Copts have been able to break ethnic barriers and find solace in partners from across the globe. Not only were they a diversity of ethnic backgrounds, but also diversity of religious or denominational affiliation. The couples that I interviewed came from Hindu, Catholic, Baptist, Greek Orthodox, Lutheran, Mennonite, Christian Reformed, Anglican, Romanian Orthodox, and Christian non-denominational backgrounds. 9 out of the 18 couples interviewed were married in the Coptic Orthodox Church, and they all identified themselves as currently being Coptic Orthodox. Out of the 9 couples who married in other churches or had a civil marriage, 4 couples had their marriage blessed in the Coptic Church through baptism or confirmation of the Canadian spouse, and are currently practicing members of the Coptic Church. So even though they had married outside of the Coptic Church, they came back and had their marriage blessed in the Coptic Orthodox Church. While 3 couples were satisfied in their new Christian denomination and are actively practicing in them. In the case of the last 2 couples, their marriage were officiated in another Christian denomination, and yet the Egyptian spouses continued to identify themselves as Coptic, while their Canadian partners remained faithful to the churches, Catholic and Baptist, which officiated in their wedding. It should be mentioned that the Hindu spouse, as I mentioned earlier, converted to the Coptic Orthodox Church. So it's clear here that along with the ethnic diversity came also a mosaic of religious and denominational diversity in the Coptic marriages. And it seemed that 1/2 of the marriages were officiated in the Coptic Church, while the rest occurred in other churches or sometimes in City Hall. Here we have to start thinking as a church, and again, I'm going to reserve talking about the response of the church until next time, God willing. But we could have missed out on half of the cross-cultural marriages because of reasons that we were not able to actively involve them and find a way to have them married in the Coptic Church. Let me move to the last point I want to mention tonight, and then I want to have an open discussion. I have some questions for you because I want to hear you out. I don't want it to be one way. But one of the things that we always have to think about is stereotypes and prejudices. When we come to cross-cultural marriages, and these prejudices come from two ways, either from the individuals who intermarried or from families. Prejudice is an unjustified or incorrect attitude, usually negative, towards an individual based solely on the individual's membership of an ethnic or a social group. For example, a person may hold prejudiced views towards a certain race or a gender. But discrimination is the behavior or actions which are usually negative towards an individual or group of people, especially on the basis of sex, race, or a social class. Many of our young adults that I had interviewed met their spouses at school. They went to the same school together. They met them at work. Some met on the internet. Social media is now big. Some others met them through a friend, like a mutual friend who introduced them to one another. And this was actually quite surprising because the old kind of mentality was that you usually met your spouse through church. And people were involved in church through various activities and trips and such in order maybe to meet your future spouse. But we can see a new paradigm and a new trend that is happening now in our community. I'm not promoting or taking away any of the traditions. I'm just reporting on a new phenomenon where some individuals may not necessarily see themselves as marrying individuals of the same ethnicity. They see themselves marrying someone of a different ethnic background. Maybe they grew up in an area where there were all like a majority of a certain ethnic group. All their friends, were of that ethnic group. They were able to communicate with them and have fun with them and speak their kind of language. And over time, they developed an interest in that kind of mindset, and they saw themselves connected with this group. And some people actually told me, my parents never thought that I would marry someone who is, of an Egyptian descent or background. It happened. So the new paradigm is that people are involved in the community. They're meeting individuals of different ethnic backgrounds, and they're developing feelings towards one another, and they start to think that, hey, will this work? And in many cases, things are going well until it comes to the whole issue of the church and of faith, and which church are we going to go to, and where we're going to raise our children, and are we going to belong to the same church or a different kind of church? The challenge that some of these couples face, number one, in overlooking or in conquering their own fears about other ethnic groups or ethnic people who are of different backgrounds. Because many people who grew up in the church, have had some fears. How will I communicate with them? Will we speak the same language? Will we have the same interests? The second kind of stereotyping or discrimination comes from the family, the parents. And in some cases, the parents are very flexible and kind, and I've interviewed many couples who, were very welcoming, and they said, yeah, we never expected our daughter or our son to marry someone from from church. Now, I have to say again, I'm not like promoting one type of marriage, but marrying from one's own ethnic group is still the majority. But I'm speaking about this phenomenon specifically that we have not maybe had so much understanding about before, or spoken publicly about, or educated ourselves or others about. That's why we want to bring the other perspective also into view here. So meet the parents who are very much grounded in their own ethnic background, culture, language, and they have their doubts. How will this person who is coming from another ethnic background melt or dissolve into the family fabric? We might be sitting there and speaking all Arabic and joking around. This person is sitting. If we say to him or to her certain phrases that we're used to, they will not get it. And there's a whole lot of adjustment that happens in the family dynamic. But here we want to urge our families and our parents, and I always say to parents who come and ask me when I get involved in a cross-cultural relationship to pray to God and ask Him, is this your will, God? They always ask me, Abuna, if this was your daughter, will you marry her to this man? And I say, if I'm standing here to advocate this marriage and I wouldn't accept it for my own biological daughter, then I'm a hypocrite. I can't. But if I see that they are compatible and they love one another and they're willing to be part of the church community and they're working hard really to make this work, she is happy and he is happy, then why not bless this marriage as a family and as a church? After all, we as parents are the ones who brought our children to Canada. And you can't blame them now. And we knew that Canada is a multicultural society. And we send our children to schools and universities and to play sports and go to the library and work in places where they meet people of all nations. The early church advocated, as we heard from St. John Chrysostom, he advocated to choose the person, not look at the nationality, not look at how rich this person is, but look at the depth. And I feel that we as a church and as a community can benefit from so many spiritual individuals who are coming from different ethnicities and backgrounds. And we thank God that through His grace we have led the way, maybe throughout the Coptic community, the whole wide world, diaspora, and even in many other ethnicities, as a model of a church community who loves, who nurtures, who cherishes, who encourages individuals of all nations and tongues and tribes and languages. And look how much better we are as a church community. Look how amazing it is to come to church and feel that you are in heaven. We have not lost anything by nurturing and loving, by encouraging and finding a way for everyone to belong. But it doesn't just take one or two or a select few people to achieve this goal. It takes the whole village. It takes the entire community and congregation. To understand this mindset of God first and foremost, we cannot call ourselves Christian, a Christian church or community, unless we do what is written in the scriptures, unless we learn what the church fathers and the church traditions have shown us, that God has now loved the world and He extends His grace to each and every person. I'm not saying that every cross-cultural marriage is a successful marriage. No, there has been divorces. But I believe that these divorces have happened because the foundation was not correct to start with. The couple did not start with the church, and they did not start with God. But also, I lay some of the blame on how we as a church community have treated and handled cross-cultural marriages. We have not nurtured them, we have not accepted them, we have not given them a position of leadership and involvement in the church. When I did my interviews with the 18 couples, most of them said, we are not involved in any services in the church. We barely attend any outings or excursions or overnight trips in the church. Only half of them said, we attend the liturgy but leave right away. And I'm speaking about the entire GTA area. So our mandate as a church is to nurture all kinds of couples. Again, we're not excluding like same culture couples or things of that sort. But especially for cross-cultural relationships and marriages, they need extra attention, extra help, extra nourishment. Because they may come in with certain individuals feeling that they are a minority in the church. Everyone looks Middle Eastern or Egyptian or whatever, or Sudanese, of course, extension from Egyptian immigrants. And they may look like a visible minority in the church, but they are a majority outside of the church. That's not a good feeling. That's not a good feeling, because sometimes we make individuals feel that they are a minority in the church. They're a visible minority. We look at them differently. We treat them differently. This is not Christian. If we are going to be a Christ-loving church, we have to re-examine our ways and our teachings and the way that we come to church to reflect the image of Scriptures. So, in conclusion, today, my prayer is that we start to adjust or re-examine the way that we as an ethnic group have maybe discriminated against other groups. Like maybe we are a visible minority outside, but when we are in the church, we are a majority. So how is it that we complain outside that we are being mistreated because we're a minority, but we do the exact same thing to individuals when they come to us in the church? Change has to come from the foundation. We are a community as a church who is promoting a Canadian value, but from the grassroots. We're not waiting for the government to come down and ask us and give us stimulus to do as such. No. What is so special about this community is that we're praying to God to be an agent of change, not only within the city, but all throughout North America and beyond. And with this kind of mindset, we praise God that in the last few years, there has arisen 17 churches with the same kind of mindset and ideology and mission statement, with 8 more that are coming up. And we are praying to God that this will be the mindset in each and every church community, all throughout the diaspora. Where we go in, we find a flourishing, diverse community who are from all nations, tongues, tribes, and languages. We learned today that God's heart is in nurturing every individual that He has created. God so loved the world. We learned today that we live in a multicultural community and society, and that, in part, means that we are going to meet people from all across the world. And our reaction as a church has to be receiving and welcoming and nurturing and finding ways to resolve conflicts that may happen within families, within church communities. Yes, there will be challenges. I'm not saying that it's a very easy adjustment. It's going to be a difficult adjustment because our comfort zone is when we see people who speak in Arabic, we speak in Arabic and hang out and laugh, and then other people feel isolated. It's going to take some adjustment from us. It's difficult because sometimes we have been brought up, and I know, in many cases, these people, mistreated me, or I had an incident with this group or ethnic group, or I've seen something in the media or Hollywood that portrays this group of people as being such and such. So when I see someone from that community, my mind, automatically goes, maybe this is part of this mafia group or this part of that group or whatever it is. And I start treating them as such. It will take us sometimes to wash our brains out of all the injustices and prejudices and discriminations, to become color blind. And I'm praying to God every day, Lord, wash my brain out of all these impurities of the past that I grew up with, or I've learned maybe through the influence of culture. Yes, there are bad things happening in the world, but also we as a culture have bad people. Doesn't mean, that I am pure this or pure that. Purity is nonsense. But taking each individual as a creation of God, as a beautiful image of God, instill in me a wise but pure heart, wise as serpents, but also simple as doves, in treating one another. And honestly, I can tell you, after so many years in serving in a cross-cultural community, a multicultural society, I've not seen one bad person who hurt anyone else. So all of these prejudices and discriminatory thoughts and ideas are mostly incorrect. Yet we have to be wise, but pure in heart. Watch what will happen to our church if we convert and become like Jesus, who dealt with the Samaritan woman, who dealt with Zacchaeus, and who dealt with the centurion who was a Gentile, and who dealt with the Romans, and everyone with extreme kind of love and kindness. This is the mind of Christ that you and I pray to have. And glory be to God forever and ever. Amen.